right. Welcome, everybody. It's a little early still, but we wanted to open it up and allow everybody an opportunity to jump in and join us for this next installment of the Financial Aid Atlas with myself and our Director of Financial Aid, Ryan French. So we'll give it just a few minutes and we will get started. If I switch a couple things around. All right, again, thank you everyone for joining early if you're already here. If not, we're just hanging out for just a couple more minutes until everyone joins us. We'll get started here in about 3 minutes time. So get comfortable and we'll get started here shortly. Just a few more minutes now. We will get started here in 2 more minutes. So join us, get comfy, grab a bowl of popcorn in the meantime, get a drink. Ryan's got his fizzy water. Got my big jug of water. We're ready for you guys. 1 more minute now. All right, 7 o'clock on the dot. So we are going to get started here. Welcome to the next installment of the Financial Aid Atlas series with myself. I'm Zach Sawyer, our Assistant Director of Admissions here at Maine Maritime Academy. I'm joined by everybody's favorite Director of Financial Aid, Ryan French. Tonight we're going to be going over the next step, which is the Federal Aid Unveiled, Maneuvering the World of Federal Grants, Loans, and Work Study, which is coming at kind of an ironic time. We will have Ryan explain why that's a little bit funny at this point in the juncture. But looking forward to having everybody else come through and engage. Again, these are recorded sessions. These will go live on YouTube as soon as we're done. Please let us know if you have any questions. We will get our contact information up at the end of the presentation. So if you have anything that you want to reach out about individually, go right ahead. In the meantime, if you have questions during the session, go ahead and throw them right in the chat function in YouTube. I'll be responding as we go. We're excited to be in this brand new space. Again, this is our second installment that we're doing actually through YouTube directly instead of through Zoom. So we're still getting used to the technical pieces of this. In fact, I am on the back end here doing a little bit of production. So I know I was dealing with some typing issues on the last time where people could hear the audio. We won't have that problem this time, I promise. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ryan. He can get started with his presentation. Take it away, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Zach, and welcome everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks for sticking with us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're coming back for another episode, thanks so much for sticking around and listening to us talk about financial aid, because not everybody loves to do that. So I get really jazzed about it, but I'm a bit of a nerd. So let's jump right in. So today we're going to talk about federal aid. So we're going to talk about a wide variety of federal aid. I wanted to start off the evening though with a little bit of an update on the FAFSA. So some people might have been watching the news, or just paying attention in general, or you've tried to do the FAFSA and you've run into some issues. And I want to give everybody a little bit of an update. So we're going to talk about the fact that it is open. So if you haven't gone in and logged on and taken a look at the FAFSA yet, definitely jump in and do it. But it is delayed. So we already knew that it was delayed. It didn't open until December 30th. It is supposed to be open 24/7 right now, but I did hear today that there were some issues with the site. So there's definitely been some site maintenance going on here or there. So studentaid.gov is not like the perfect website, but um, that being said, over 3 million people have completed the FAFSA already for the 24-25 academic year. So if you're not one of them, definitely jump in and start working on that and take a look at it. And we'll go through some of the information about it, and we're going to talk about the fruits of that labor is sort of the point of this whole episode, talking about what federal aid students at Maine Maritime can expect, and regardless of whether you come here or go to another school, a lot of this will remain true. So just a couple stats that are in there. You may have seen these before, but $150 billion of federal aid is available for students who complete the FAFSA every year. They have been making updates to the form, which is why it's been delayed. It usually opens at the beginning of October, didn't open until December 30th. And the newest update is that we will not be receiving data from the Department of Education. And by we, I mean the schools will not be receiving information about your FAFSA until mid-March. And that's actually also when they're going to start processing those FAFSAs. So if you've completed your FAFSA, and we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, you may have like a little blue box under your activity screen at studentaid.gov. And that little blue box says that it's in review if you've submitted it already. It's going to keep saying in review probably until mid-March when they start actually processing everything. It's just kind of the way it is right now. It's a little frustrating. Some people are trying to make decisions about the school, and it's really hard to make a decision when you don't have all the information about what your aid is going to look like. So we're working on some contingencies and figuring out how we might be able to assist people who are really facing these big decisions and try and help out with that. I don't have a ton of information about that right now, but as soon as we know, we'll reach out and let you guys know. The other stat on there: 1 in 3 students. That is the 1 in 3 students who just miss out entirely on federal aid because they don't complete the FAFSA. I would imagine most of the people who are joining us this evening, that's not the case because you're here to learn about the federal aid that you're getting from the FAFSA. But it's entirely possible that some of you have decided you're not going to do the FAFSA, and I would encourage you to definitely do it because you're kind of leaving money on the table. Some people, they may only be eligible for loans. We're going to talk about that. But there's other federal aid on the table, and even if you are only eligible for loans, there's still institutional aid and other aid out there that doesn't really care whether you got the Pell Grant. So it's a really good idea to complete it. The other little fact or piece of information on this screen is talking about checking your email. So if you've submitted the FAFSA, you should have received an email from the U.S. Department of Education, and I think the subject line is "We've received your FAFSA form." And that email is a version of what's called a FAFSA submission summary. So you should be able to scroll down that email and see, like, yes, you've completed your FAFSA, and here's a preliminary, basically a preliminary data point, piece of information called the Student Aid Index, the SAI. And if you've been watching, previous episodes, you may be familiar with SAI. We're going to talk about it a little bit more later, but that number is really important. Some students aren't going to get an SAI. I think I mentioned in a prior episode that I went on and did the FAFSA myself back at the beginning of January, and I completed the FAFSA, got it all submitted, did not get an SAI. So there's definitely students out there who are not going to receive an SAI when they complete their FAFSA. For those students, I apologize. It'll be really hard to make a judgment about what age you may or may not be eligible for. For the students that did receive an SAI, I'm definitely encouraging students to hold on to that email, because that SAI may be really important as we start talking about budgeting and figuring out what aid you may or may not be eligible for. So keep an eye out for that. One other update I wanted to mention, there are a few still issues with the FAFSA. I know I've talked to a number of families who, have gotten hung up here or there. There's a couple ones that have been resolved. So if you haven't logged in a while, it may be a good idea to just sort of log back in, refresh, take a look, try and go through the process again. There are a few that I just wanted to mention really quickly that there's still active issues. There's still bugs with the system. One of them is actually kind of a big deal, which is if a married student or a married parent leaves the FAFSA form, so they log out of the FAFSA form before they've entered the information for their spouse, you won't be able to add it. So it created some kind of bug. They haven't figured out how to fix it yet. And I would imagine that at least some of the people who are experiencing issues, that might be part of the problem. Um, there's also a couple of things related to social security number. So for students or parents who don't have a social security number, or for students or parents who didn't input a social security number as they were completing the form, um, there may be some issues where it's creating errors in the system, won't let you submit, won't let you get past certain pages, and right now there isn't a resolution for that either. If you do have a social security number and you did not enter one, I believe you should be able to still go in and enter one. But for people who do not have a social security number, there currently is not a workaround for that. So sorry, and just kind of keep plugging away at their. They are working through the issues. They've resolved a few of them, but there's definitely some bugs, and they're struggling for sure. If you do run into issues, unfortunately, we can't really help you too much. I wish we could, but we just don't have access on the back end to help out. I can try and direct you towards resources, but really the best resource is going to be reaching out to the studentaid.gov. They've got a chat feature. They've got a phone number that you can reach out to and sort of explain your issue. They may come back and say, "Hey, this is a known issue. We don't have a resolution at this time," but they may be able to help you out. So that's really the best resource that I can suggest. Moving on. So I shared this timeline in the last episode. It's been updated now because we've just found out that we're not receiving that FAFSA data until mid-March. And really, mid-March is when the Department of Education is going to start processing all of those all of those FAFSAs that you've completed. So 3 million so far. There'll be another, probably another million or so by the time they start processing, and that's a lot of processing to happen all at once. So I would imagine when they begin processing in mid-March, that's not necessarily going to mean that I'm going to get all of your data by mid-March. So it's pushed back a few things. One of them is obviously we are not going to get your FAFSA when we thought we were, which was basically today. We thought we'd be getting your FAFSA information, and we will not be for sure until mid-March. But then also that means that finalized financial aid offers are not going to be sent out to students probably until April, which is pretty late and is very frustrating. And I'm sure it's frustrating for a lot of you who are out there trying to decide, do you want to go to Maine Maritime? Do you want to go to some other school? Um, and some of when it comes down to finances, the FAFSA is really important, and we're just really struggling, and a lot of schools are in the same boat. So I hope you guys can be patient with us, and we'll try and work with you as much as we can. So with all that update out of the way, I just wanted to move on and sort of recap some federal financial aid terms for you guys. So if you've watched previous episodes, we've talked about some of the things about calculating financial need, but we're going to start off with cost of attendance. Um, and cost of attendance, if you don't remember, just wanted to you know refresh everybody's memories a little bit. Um, Cost of attendance is your budget. So cost of attendance is the number that the financial aid office comes up with um, based on your chosen degree, based on your state of residency, based on a few other factors. This is what you can reasonably expect to pay for your education. And cost of attendance is sort of it's an estimate, it's a budget, it's also an inflated number because we're including not only the things that the school is going to bill you for, we're also including things that the school does not bill you for, but that you want to pay attention to as you're trying to decide between one school and another, and you're looking at those costs. We're including both direct costs and indirect costs, and most schools are going to do a really good job about, pointing that out and showing you that, here's your tuition, your lab fees, your other mandatory, maybe undergraduate fees, housing, your food, things like that. Those are all things that the school bills you for. So those are your direct costs. And then on the other side, you've got maybe personal expenses, transportation costs, your books, your supplies, things like that are on the other side of the equation. Those are your indirect costs. But all of that together is your total budget, your total cost of attendance. The other one is the student aid index, which I mentioned briefly a few minutes ago. That's basically the result of the FAFSA. So if you imagine the FAFSA is just one big um, kind of like an algorithm that you're just plugging a bunch of numbers into. So you're putting in your demographic information, you're putting in your financial information from your tax returns. Um, the number that spits out at the end is the SAI. And your SAI is still, we've talked about maybe some of the changes. You've heard some of the changes from year to year. In the FAFSA, it used to be that it would spit out something called the EFC, the expected family contribution. Um, and now it's spitting out the student aid index, the SAI. It's still basically the same concept. It's intended to represent your family's financial situation, so that we can sort of look at a student's SAI, compare it to any other student's SAI, and get a feel for where one student versus another might be with their family financial strength. And then that number is used to calculate a student's financial need, which is the last one that we want to talk about. So financial need, it's not the bottom line number. It's not really like this is the number that you need to pay to come to school. It's really a target number. So it's what we use to determine your eligibility for need-based aid. And you come up with that by taking the total cost of attendance and subtracting the SAI, and that's a student's financial need. And if that number is $1 or more, you have financial need according to the federal government, and you are eligible for need-based aid. The lower that, or I guess the higher that number gets, the more need that you have, um, the more eligibility you may have for other federal aid, other institutional aid, other aid in general. So the way that math kind of checks out is the lower your SAI is, the more need you will have. So the lower your SAI is, the more aid will open up and unlock for you. Um, so we're going to jump right in. The first thing that we talk about is the free stuff that everybody wants. So I'm going to start right there. We're going to talk about federal grants. So not everybody is eligible for federal grants. If you aren't sure whether you would or would not be eligible um, based on your family financial situation, definitely you should do the FAFSA and find out. Even families who are sure that they're not going to be eligible for any free money from the federal government, definitely you still need to do the FAFSA. Because the number of times that I've talked to families who say, we're not going to be eligible for anything, and then they wind up being eligible for stuff that they weren't expecting. So federal grants, the two big ones are Pell and SEOG. Pell is just Pell, that's not an acronym or anything, but SEOG stands for the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, which is just an extra little amount of money that schools have the ability to award to students. We're going to start with Pell. So I included that maximum Pell award number, the $7,395. That was for 23-24. The federal government still has not released the updated information for 24-25 about what the maximum Pell amount is going to be. So we're kind of in the dark there, but I would guess that it's probably going to be at least the 73.95. I would guess. I don't know for sure, but I'm gonna assume that it's going to be at least that much. So when we're talking about Pell, that's the kind of money that we're talking about. Like I was saying with the SAI number, the way that math kind of checks out is there's a point where that SAI gets to, maybe let's say it's $6,500 or less, you're going to be eligible for the Pell Grant. And as that number goes down, you're going to be eligible for more and more Pell Grants. So people who have a zero SAI are typically eligible for the most amount of federal grant money. And then as that number goes up, the eligibility goes down. And it's kind of complicated, but very basically, the lower that SAI is, the more eligibility you're going to have. The supplemental grant program is sent to the schools and then awarded out to Pell eligible students. So if you're eligible for Pell, the way it's supposed to work is kind of on a first come, first serve basis. So that's why I said down there, day late, dollar short. We're kind of all in the same boat right now. A lot of us have, a lot of people have filled out the FAFSA and are just sort of sitting and waiting. By this point in the year in the cycle, usually, I've probably already, awarded a lot of that SCOG to students. But unfortunately, where we're at right now, we're kind of sitting and waiting to receive that FAFSA information. So typically, it's first come, first serve, meaning the first students who complete the FAFSA, if they're eligible for Pell, they're getting that supplemental grant. And then as soon as that money runs out, we stop awarding it. So it's a really good idea to complete your FAFSA as quickly as possible. In this case, it's going to be a little different because we're waiting for millions of FAFSAs to unlock right now. But the principle, I think, is going to remain the same. When you complete the FAFSA, the Department of Education does log the day that you've completed it. So there's a couple ideas running around about how we're going to handle that. But I would guess that the primary way we're going to handle it is to go in and say, this student completed their FAFSA on this particular day. We're gonna, we're gonna award it in that order. Um, there's usually enough SEOG to go around with everybody, but just so you're aware, there's going to be some, workarounds related to that timing. If you are somebody who completed the FAFSA or have gotten as far as you can or are locked out and can't finish it or submit it, don't worry. We're still going to account for that as we get into and begin processing all of that federal aid. So I don't want you to get worried about that. But just so you're aware, there is, there is sort of a first come, first serve process with SEOG. So if you can go in and get your FAFSA done now, figure out any issues that you're experiencing or get those resolved with studentaid.gov, that'd be really helpful. Moving on, we're going to talk about the federal direct loan program. And I'm going to turn the volume down on my phone because it keeps ringing. So the federal direct loan program. This is a different thing. So we were talking about the free money before. We're talking about grant money. That's money that you don't have to pay back. That's money that the Department of Education says that you can have, or we, award to you, and you don't have to pay it back. It just goes straight towards your education. Basically, reducing the amount of money that you owe each year without having any payback requirements. The federal direct loan program is different. So a loan is a loan. If you aren't familiar with what a loan is, we're going to have an entire episode devoted to talking about loans. But very basically, a loan is money that you get for college that you pay back after graduation, which is kind of how it's designed and how it's built, but also um, you do have the ability to pay it back before you graduate, but you are allowed to not pay it back before you graduate, which I think is the really important part. So the federal direct loan program, the ones that you're going to hear about the most are those first two that are listed, the unsubsidized and subsidized. Those are the student loans that pretty much everybody is eligible for the federal student loan. So any first time undergraduate student that completes the FAFSA successfully is going to be eligible for unsubsidized loans. As you progress through school, there are some caps to how much you can get, but most students never reach that number. If you are maybe a non-traditional student who's attended school before and you're coming now, you're coming to MMA after already receiving loans previously, you're probably pretty familiar with the loan program, but you may have less eligibility for loans. But I would say, for the most part, 90% of the people that we're working with as first time undergrad students are going to be eligible for that $5,500 in their first year. So that's basically the max that a dependent undergraduate student is going to be eligible for. If you are an independent student, you're determined independent by the Department of Education when you complete your FAFSA. You may be eligible for more, but again, most students that we're talking to, they're dependent undergrads. They're coming out of high school, and those students are going to be eligible for that $5,500 in loans. Depending on that SAI number that we were talking about and that need calculation that we were going through, you may be eligible for a portion of that federal loan to be what's called subsidized. So, subsidized loans are available to undergraduate students who have financial need. Um, and they basically will split out and by they, I mean we, will split out that federal aid and say, um, you've got $5,500 in loan eligibility this year. A portion of that is now subsidized. A portion of that is unsubsidized. Um, a portion of it will always be unsubsidized, meaning they don't let you get the full $5,500 in a subsidized loan. And to explain, I guess, what the difference is between those two loans, I probably should have started there. The subsidized loan is essentially interest free. So it's not accruing any interest while you're enrolled full time in school. So while you're here, you borrow, let's say your freshman year, this is a pretty typical scenario. You get offered $3,500 in subsidized loans, $2,000 in unsubsidized loans. When you graduate, that $3,500 is still going to be $3,500. The $2,000, if you choose to borrow that in your freshman year, it will be accruing interest at the federal rate, which is right now about 5.5%. It may go up, but right now that's where it is. So it's going to go up about 5.5% per year while you're in school. It's not a ton of money, but it does make a difference. So when we're talking to families, and loans are at all going to be part of the equation, the subsidized is definitely the first one to go for. So if you're thinking about borrowing at all over the next 4 years, you know, taking that subsidized loan offer is usually a pretty good idea. And honestly, taking the unsubsidized loan offer is usually a pretty good idea, because even though it's accruing interest, if you're planning on borrowing beyond the federal direct loan program, um, the federal loans are typically the federal student loans are typically going to be some of the best rates and some of the best terms that you're going to get. So there is an additional loan program that I've listed there, which is called the Parent Plus program. That is also offered through the feds. That's also um, it's separate from the FAFSA. A student does have to have completed the FAFSA in order to be eligible for the Plus loan, but a parent actually logs into the FAFSA to complete a separate application for the Parent Plus loan. The Plus loan is an interesting program. Um, it can be really, really helpful and can be, kind of the best option for some families. But I don't always encourage, leaning, jumping onto that program first, because there may be other programs out there that are better, private loan programs that might be better. And it's always a good idea to try and prioritize, finding private scholarships, institutional scholarships. Let's find the free money first. Then let's look and see maybe privately, and we'll go into loans in more detail, like I said. But um, you might look for private loans first, kind of see what's out there, see what you're offered, and then the Parent Plus loan program can be a really good fallback. The reason I say it's a good fallback is because The way it's structured is a little different. Um, in the Parent Plus program, the parent is the primary borrower. The student's name is attached to the loan, but really just as a beneficiary of those funds. Like the money is intended for that student's education. It comes straight to the school in the student's name, but the parent is the borrower. So the parent takes that on to their own credit. It affects their debt to income. Um, it can impact some things for the parent. So it doesn't always work for all families. Happy to go over if you're thinking about loans and you want to understand some of those programs, there's a ton of resources online. There's resources on our website, and obviously reach out. I'm happy to talk to you about that stuff. But just so you're aware, those are the loan programs that are available. Most of our students are going to be eligible for those subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Well, most of our students are definitely going to be eligible for the unsubsidized loans. Some of our students are going to be eligible for those subsidized loans. And most of our students are going to be eligible for the Parent Plus loan, but I wouldn't necessarily jump right on that program right off the bat. So the last big federal aid category that we talk about is the work study program. So federal work study is really the opportunity to work and earn a paycheck while you're here at school. That's also a need-based program, meaning you have to have some calculated financial need in order to be eligible for work study. It's also a question usually on the FAFSA, and I'm trying to think back, and I don't know that I actually got that question, but, typically, and I'm not sure if it's on this updated 24-25 FAFSA or not, but typically there is a question on the FAFSA that asks if you're interested in work study. Um, I just encourage you to say yes, because there isn't really a lot of harm to saying yes and to accepting a work study offer, because it is an earned award, meaning it's going to be included if a student's eligible for it. It's going to be included on a student's financial aid package. It is also something that they're going to be able to say, yes, I want this. No, I don't want this. And it can impact some of the calculations as we look at other scholarships, as we look at loans, things like that. It can be part of the math as we're looking at it, but it's really it's different in that the student has to then go find an employer on campus, a professor who's looking for tutors, or your academic advisors can help point in the direction. There's also like specific departments, like our enrollment department. Zach, in admissions, works with a ton of students here at Maine Maritime Academy, doing tours around campus. You may have met some of those students if you've come and taken a tour here. And if you haven't taken a tour, check out the schedule and reach out to Zach, because they do tours pretty regularly, and it's a great tour. You get some really good hands-on time here on campus. But all of those students are employees of the school, so they get a paycheck. They get paid to be here. If you are work study eligible and you decide not to, seek employment while you're here, you don't get you don't get paid that work study amount. So it's really, the way I look at it, is sort of like a golden ticket, because department heads are looking for students who are work study eligible, and there may be positions on campus that are only open to students who are eligible for work study. But if you're not eligible for work study, there are still definitely positions open. I know Zach works with, students who are and aren't, and it doesn't, really matter too much to the admissions team. There are departments who care more, care less. There are positions that, require it, and positions that don't. So if you're not work study eligible, it's not a big deal. If you choose not to accept work study, that's okay. But if you do accept it and you don't get a job, you don't get the money, basically. And then the money doesn't go, the reason it's a little different from the other sources of aid is that when you get paid, you're not actually receiving those funds as part of your financial aid package. So it's not going towards your bill in the same way. You're actually receiving a paycheck, and a student is allowed to do with that money whatever they want to do with that money. So a lot of our students use those funds for additional expenses, personal costs, book supplies, things like that. Some students take those paychecks and use it to pay off, some of their bill if they've got, leftover charges, or they want to prepay for a next semester or whatever. But the money is yours, so there's no requirement to turn around and use that towards your charges for that particular academic year. The reason I mention that is because when we look at a financial aid offer, a lot of times it's going to be uh, if work study is on that offer and you start doing the math and saying, well, here's how much aid I got and here's how much it's going to cost me. So I subtract the aid from how much it's going to cost me, and this is my bottom line. If you're including work study in there and you choose not to seek employment, or your student chooses not to have a job because they're it's busy here, it's a huge adjustment. First year students, we don't necessarily encourage that they go and work a ton of hours while they're trying to focus on their education, or potentially their the regiment, or they're on an athletic team or whatever. It can it's totally fine if you're not working, but if you're not working and you're including that in your budgeting, that can create a little bit of a problem as you're trying to figure out that math. So just important to keep that in mind. There are, just a few things on here. There are limitations to how much you can work. So no students are allowed to work greater than 20 hours per week during the academic year. If there are breaks, so like breaks longer than 5 days, so like during the summer, students are allowed to work a little bit more. Sometimes um, the members of our various teams, at the admissions students, the students working for uh, our residence life program, they may be helping out with some of the programs over the summer. Students coming to campus for orientation, things like that. So those students are allowed to work more hours, but for the most part, there is a 20-hour per week max that students can work. And again, there's more information about our work study program online if you have specific questions. I think there's been plenty of people who have been throwing questions in the chat, so feel free to do that. And Zach and I can get to them. And with that, I'm kind of done with federal aid, and I'm hoping, given us 25 minutes here at the end, that we'll be able to address some of your questions, any of the ones that Zach hasn't been able to get to yet. We're going to go through and try and talk about them on air. I did want to point out some additional resources. Here's the contact information. My contact information is up there. We've got Angela and Jeff in the office here at Financial Aid. You may have talked to one or all of us. So we're all here, basically 5 days a week. Zach's information is down there as well, in the admissions team. So if you have questions about any of the admissions process, definitely go, reach out to him. There's also, you may have been assigned somebody who's handling your admission process specifically. So we've got a bunch of great people over in the admissions team, and they're all really great and helpful. If you have billing questions, which there probably won't be a lot of billing questions yet because no bills are out, but if you're curious about billing, if you're curious about any of those processes, you can reach out to our student account manager, Diane, or the fiscal operations tech, Casey, up at the billing office. They're both great and really helpful. And then if you're having issues with the FAFSA itself, I just included that little thing down there. They've got that little owl on the screen. I mentioned it in the last episode. I forgot to mention it today, but there is a chat function. There is the phone number that you can call, and while you're on the FAFSA and anywhere on that studentaid.gov page, you should be able to click on that little owl. It's in the bottom right hand corner, and it's sort of their virtual assistant, so it can help you answer some slightly softball questions, I guess. If you've got a really complicated request, I'd recommend reaching out to the professionals at studentaid.gov. But the owl can be pretty helpful. So this is our time for Q&A. We're going to go over to the chat. Zach and I are going to take a look at it. Zach's probably got some questions for me already burning. I did want to mention just real quick, our next episode is going to be in 3 weeks, February 21st. We're going to be talking about scholarships. This is the time of year. If you haven't started looking up and finding scholarships, you should be doing that. We're going to do a deeper dive into how to, prioritize scholarships, how to find specific scholarships, where to look, some of the programs that we've used that have had success, and we're going to be doing that on the 21st. So, Zach, what do you got for us?
All right. So we had a couple that came in a little earlier, and I've been trying to answer some along the way. I am going to have Ryan verify all my answers and responses just because I have taken a step back from the financial aid world. I did work in that role for a little while, and I'm now on the admission side wholeheartedly. I still have a bit of knowledge, which is why Ryan and I are the ones who are putting this on for you. Um, and we get to hang out, which is also fun. Um, but I want to make sure that I'm not giving any improper information. So I'm going to have him verify anything that I did send out. So I'm going to start back at the top of the chat just to make sure that I haven't said anything that's out of place. Firstly, we had two questions that came in that I didn't want to answer, Ryan, because I think these are ones that are going to come up a couple of times. So I'll ask the first one. And this is from a student. My parents submitted my FAFSA. It submitted my part two, still requiring a signature at the end of the form. Is there a way to get the form back, or will I need to wait until mid-March, like you mentioned?
That's a great question. I would say it depends. If it's actually been fully submitted, meaning you go to your FAFSA activity page, you go to the 24-25 FAFSA, and it says in review, there's no way to open it back up right now. I don't know why. I think I noticed that earlier myself actually, and it's a little frustrating. So yeah, I think probably it will not open back up for you to submit your signature part. If it's been fully submitted and you didn't sign it, what'll happen is it'll go through processing. It will still get sent to the school, but it will get sent to the school with a little flag on it that says that you didn't sign it. At that point, you should be able to access it and put your signature in there. Um, if if it hasn't officially been submitted, then you may still be able to access it if it hasn't been submitted. But if you've got that little blue box that says in review, then unfortunately, yeah, I think you're probably waiting until mid March. Sorry.
Thanks for that, Ryan, and sorry if that ends up being the situation. Hopefully, this all gets figured out, and we don't have to go through this process again for next year. But for this year, obviously, we're wading through it with the federal government programming as it's kind of unveiling. So bear with us as we bear with them, and you bear with them as well. We're in this kind of struggle bus together, so at least there's some solidarity there, if nothing else.
Yeah, shared pain.
So the next question came from TD. He's asked a couple questions, so thank you, TD. Appreciate it, and also thank you to Lego Master 06 for that other question. Appreciate that.
Lego Master,
Um,
nice,
I
love
might
it.
have read your essay. Um, so TD asks, how do you reflect on the FAFSA or let school know that you have two students in college at the same time?
Cool. Okay, that's a great question. So the way the FAFSA used to work, which is the way a lot of people are used to it, um, you were able to include the number of students that you had in school. So if you're a parent, you've got two kids who are in college, you're able to say you had two kids in college. And when that number is spit out at the end, which used to be at EFC and is now SAI, the EFC will get split in half between those two students. SAI does not do that. So if you have two students in school, I am told that part of the algorithm that we were talking about that spits out SAI at the end, um, it's still sort of accounting for number in school. So it should still be asking you that question. You know, it's asking about household size, so number of people in the household, number of people in your household who are in college. It's still part of the math, but it's not the same processing. So if you're a parent who was dealing with EFC, like you're familiar with EFC, you've seen how it looks when it gets split in half. I would just keep an eye on it, and when that SAI comes out, when it comes out official, we'll be able to review and kind of take a look and see what changes happened. I think the goal is that the feds are trying to increase the amount of students who are getting federal aid and getting the Pell Grant and things like that. So I would hope that they're trying to account for that fully. But I do know that it's a big concern. It's a big concern for a lot of families, and it's a big concern for the Department of Education and for some of the financial aid associations that I'm a part of and familiar with. They're all talking about it. It's a big deal. We do have like in extreme situations where maybe you've got a family who have four kids in school and their EFC got split four ways, And now it's not getting split 4 ways, and all of a sudden, all 4 of their children aren't eligible for the Pell Grant, for example, um, which I guess is it's possible that that could happen. In those kinds of situations, we've kind of been told that we have the ability to account for that through a process called professional judgment, which kind of happens on the back end through the financial aid office. We have the ability to sort of account for some of those things, but it's just going to be really sticky. It's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of documentation requirements, and I'm not trying to discourage you in any way from doing that process, but I just want you to know it's going to be a process. So I guess you know, shorter answer is it is supposed to account for it somewhat. It may not account for it in the way that it has in the past, and if it's significantly impactful to the amount of aid that your students are eligible for, then there is a process that we can sort of get started and see if you may be eligible for that professional judgment process. So we should stay in touch, TD. Thanks.
Awesome, great. Yeah, and if you have any more of these questions, or if TD you have a specific situation you want to have a discussion about, obviously YouTube is probably not the best place to do it. So if you want to call in, we can go back to that slide in a little bit that has everybody's contact information. I suggest giving Ryan a call and just explaining the situation, because it sounds like you definitely have a situation that would warrant a little bit more of a personal touch based on the information that we're gathering from these questions. So thank you again for putting them in. T actually asked another question or subsequent questions, and I did answer these ones in the chat. So I'm putting this to you, Ryan, but I'll throw out my answer first. All right.
Sure.
So TD asks, is the $5,500 per year or per semester the student can borrow? I said that's the annual for a first student award, and it's broken down in half by semester. So it'd be $2,750 per semester for that first year. Correct?
Beautiful.
All right.
Beautiful
Subsequent.
answer.
I've still got it.
Good job, Nate.
Subsequent question was, what about the subsequent years in the student's education? I said it goes up by $1,000 to $6,500 in the sophomore year or second year, and then to $7,500 in the junior and senior year. Third and fourth year are the same amount.
Perfect.
Still the same. All right, so it
You
hasn't
got it.
changed any
Got
since
it.
my day.
So
So it
that's
does increase in
just
that
the
thousand
one.
dollar increment from freshman to sophomore, and then again from sophomore to junior, but then it stays the same your junior and senior year. And
Correct.
then Ryan, out of curiosity, just because I want to follow up on this train of thought, is if a student were to say come to Maine Maritime for the 5 year systems engineering program, would that student be eligible for aid in their fifth year?
Man, you had to ask me that. Oh, I have to do math, man. You're gonna make me pull the calculator out.
That's okay.
Let me. So I'm gonna do some math and I'm gonna say some things while I'm doing math so I can fill up the time. But uh, this is all based on 23-24 information. So I don't anticipate that there's going to be any updates to the loan eligibility year over year, but it could happen. So um, it's possible that these numbers might be a little different. I would imagine if they're going to be different, they're going to go up, but they might be a little different. Um, to your question, Zach, a 5 year student usually would still have a little bit of federal loan eligibility by their fifth year. Um, and honestly, a lot of times, by the time they're a fifth year student, um, well, this isn't always the case, but there are a lot of students who come here who, by the time they're a fifth year student, they may actually have some additional eligibility because depending on how old you are and some of your family circumstances, you may be considered an independent student by the time you're a fifth year student. And that increases your aggregate loan eligibility. But for your undergraduate dependent student in their fifth year who's still considered a dependent, yes, they would still have one additional year of loan eligibility, and I believe it would still be at that same amount at $7,500.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. Sorry to make you do math on the spot there, bud,
No,
but
it's
I
okay.
appreciate it. I knew there was a lifetime award amount. I wanted to make sure that if we were answering questions for those students who are looking at that 5 year program, which is a program that I work with those students, so it's something that's pertinent to the people that I work with. I'd love to have them have that information and just address it here. So I appreciate you busting out the calculator and helping us figure that one out right here on the spot.
Sure. Thanks.
It looks like Nessie asked a question about international students and federal aid, and my response to her was that unfortunately, international students are not eligible for federal student aid. It's a requirement of the programs that a student has to be a U.S. citizen to be eligible for any federal aid. Am I wrong, or is that a correct statement?
Yeah, no, that's correct. International students, if you're an international student who has I believe if you have a social security number, and like a U.S. social security number, which I think there are some international students who fall into that category, who maybe have, I mean, potentially dual citizenship, or you may come from a foreign country. There are a few. There are a few students who would come from a foreign country who may have federal aid eligibility. But yet, I would say far and away, your typical international student is not going to be eligible for federal aid. Students that are not eligible for federal aid are still eligible for aid. It's a little different program. I mean, and by that I mean there are other programs out there. So there's private scholarship organizations, there's private grant organizations out there, there's private loan organizations out there that are completely open and accessible to international students. Um, but the federal programs are probably not going to be available to you. The FAFSA is not going to be accessible more than likely, and some of our institutional aid may not be accessible either, um, just just because a lot of it is reserved for U.S. citizens. And unfortunately, that's kind of how it shakes out. So if you
Thank,
are an international student and you're international considering coming to Maine Maritime Academy, definitely reach out and we can sort of explain that process to you. Um, but it definitely looks a little different, and the FAFSA unfortunately is probably not going to be enough.
Thanks for expanding on that one a little bit. I appreciate you backing me up on that too. Still not out of the
So,
ballpark,
sure.
though. It's nice to note that there are some loopholes if there are students under certain circumstances. And again, if that you think that might apply to you, go ahead and reach out to Ryan, and he'll work with you on that process. Um, or reach out directly to studentaid.gov, and they'll help you as well. Um, all right, so Heather asks if we know the estimated SAI, when and how should we get that to you? And we were just talking about this before we started this call. So I'll let you
Yeah,
take it away,
so
Ryan.
I don't want to like I've been playing with an idea. I think a lot of schools are probably going to be right where I am right now. A lot of financial aid directors are having these thoughts and having these questions like how are we going to um, put together a budget for a student when we don't have their FAFSA? I mean, we don't have any student FAFSA information until mid-March at the earliest, probably later in March. It's a little, it's a tough position to be in. And I think we're all trying to think of fun, innovative ways to get something put together for some of these students. The idea that I'm playing with right now involves that estimated SAI that you get sent in that FAFSA submission summary, and using that number. So that's why I said, keep an eye out for that email, hold on to it, um, because I may be reaching out to accepted, deposited or non-deposited. Like if you haven't made a decision on whether you want to come here or not, but you've been accepted to Maine Maritime Academy, I will be reaching out to you, I think, at some point, certainly with an update as to what the game plan is, but I may be asking you for that number. So if you can hold on to that email, it'd be really helpful. If you can hold on to that number, it will definitely be helpful. But hold on for now. I don't have a solid, fleshed out plan at the moment. But hopefully by the time we do the next webinar, you guys will know what the game plan in it is, and we'll have a better idea about what our process is going to look like moving forward, and I can give you all that information.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you,
And
Heather. I
to,
appreciate that question.
yeah, thank you, Heather. I appreciate everybody who's submitted questions.
Yes, I appreciate everybody too, but thank you, Heather.
One thing that Ryan and I are making sure is going to continue to be a part of this process as we continue to make more episodes is that we're going to continue to do this FAFSA recap or update piece at the beginning of each session, just so that we can communicate what we know to you guys who are going through this process, and we'll let you know what our plan is if it comes to a point where we can, um, as we develop a process, we can come up with a game plan and communicate that to you in as many ways as possible. So Ryan will send out these communications to certain students, and we'll continue to put these at the forefront of each one of these episodes as we go forward, and hopefully disperse a little bit more information this way as well. Our next session, which is in February, we'll start with that piece, and hopefully by that point we have a little bit of a better picture as to what that process will look like. TD asks again, in 24-25, for separated married parents, who is the contributor whom should fill out the FAFSA? What if one parent is listed as a contributor for one sibling and the other is listed for another sibling? Ooh, multifaceted,
Good
complex question.
So I did look into that. I did touch on some of that stuff in the last episode. So you can go back and take a look at that. But my basic understanding is that the way it works for a you know separated married parents. Oh, that's a good question. So I know. Sorry, I just reread I just reread the question, TD. So the it doesn't matter. I guess in that case, I don't think it matters who the contributor is. If you are still married and you're married filing jointly, then the contributor can be either one, but it's going to collect both parent information regardless, and it's going to collect that joint tax return information the same way. If you're separated, as in you're divorced and you're filing separate, um, then it depends on which parent is providing, basically which parent is providing more financial support, which in a lot of cases translates to the parent that the student is living with, but not always. So there will be like very specific questions about um, the financial support that you or your spouse or your ex-spouse or the other parent is providing to the students. I think, basically the answer to your question is it doesn't really, if the parents are both on the tax return and both parents are supporting equally in that case, it doesn't really matter which one is the contributor. If one sibling chooses one parent to be the contributor and the other parent chooses the other, I'm sorry, if one sibling chooses one parent to be a contributor and the other sibling chooses another parent to be a contributor, it doesn't make a difference because they're still reporting the same information. The demographic might be a little different. The financial might be a little different if you're talking about separate accounts or anything, but the tax information is going to stay the same. And I don't think the results are going to be much different. Um, I think it would be different if you're selecting different parent contributors in a split household. If you've got um, divorced parents filing separately, that's going to look a little different financially, depending on which parent is providing the most financial support. Um, but usually the FAFSA is going to walk you through that process. So it should be pretty, I mean, I think the idea is it's supposed to make it pretty clear as you walk through which parent needs to be the contributor in those situations. So
Nice. Thanks, Ryan.
thanks, TD. A lot of really good questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, super good questions, and thank you, TD, for filling in this Q&A section pretty much single-handedly,
Yeah.
and everybody else who's asked along the way. Really appreciate the questions. They're kind of the biggest point of why we continue to do these things, because there are questions out there, and this is our opportunity to answer those for you live. And instead of having to make a phone call, you can do it right here in the session where we're learning a little bit as we go. If anybody else has any questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat function now. I'm going to actually, Ryan, I'm going to head back to that PowerPoint. If you want to throw up our contact information just real quick, we can have that out there. So please, if you do have individual questions, you want to reach out, Ryan's contact is there. Angela, who is our assistant director, is there as well. Jeff Walls, who a lot of you have probably already talked to if you're going through this process and you've had questions and called in. He's new to the team. He's been a great addition. Myself, I can answer some preliminary questions, though, when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of financial aid. You'll have to talk to one of the pros. I'm an amateur at best at this point. But luckily, I get to be part of this process, so I'm staying fresh. I got the new info. I'm coming in on it. And then again, if once billing becomes a question, if you do have any issues for those students who are coming in for the fall of next year of 24, rather this year, um, once bills hit, which is midsummer, I think in July is when you first see your first bills. You might need those contacts, Diane and Casey, in our finance office, who can help you out with some of the billing questions you might have. Um, so reach out to us. We're happy to help. You can always ask the owl, like Ryan likes to say. However, TD did mention that he does not find the owl helpful.
I saw
Um,
that TV. Sorry, man. I'm sorry. It's not
I
always
will say
helpful.
this: you can also reach out to you can call them, and I'm sure they're getting just inundated with calls at this point. But the last couple of times that I've had to call in personally to the federal aid system through studentaid.gov, it's actually been a pretty fast response time, and the help that you get is quite good. The customer service is actually quite high, and I can't imagine that they're an incredibly happy like tranche of people at this point because of all the hiccups that they're experiencing. They're probably getting a lot of angry phone calls at this point. Just make sure that when you do call, be patient with them because they're in the midst of all this as well with us. So they might have the best source of information, but they may also just give you the same information that we've given you tonight.
Yeah.
So bear with them as much as you can, as we bear with you and bear with this and this whole process as it continues to unfold. I don't see any other questions popping up. So, it looked like Emmanuel had a question. Do you know what Section E is, Ryan? Maybe a reference to part of the FAFSA form itself?
No, I don't know. I'm
Okay.
I'm not familiar with that.
All right. Well,
But
Emmanuel, if you do
Emmanuel, if you
have a
got, we still got a
question,
couple minutes. If you want to throw a question in the chat, feel free, and I'll see if I can address it for sure.
okay. But Emmanuel, if you don't hear from us tonight on this session, go ahead and shoot an email right to those resources there. We'll make sure that we get you taken care of. I think I remember your name from last year. So let us know what we can do to help out along the way. And if that is it, I'd like to say thanks to everyone once again, one more time. Just thank you guys for letting us continue to do this, for sending us your questions, for engaging in this process. Please make sure if you heard something tonight that you're not quite familiar with, go back and watch some of the former episodes. They may be helpful, at least in catching up. And join us for the next one. We will continue to do these as long as there's interest. We will continue to do these as long as they're wanted and warranted. So I think we have programming now all the way through the month of April already lined up, which is pretty exciting for us. I know that's kind of late in the game, but because FAFSA's pushed back, this might actually end up being pretty pertinent to push back that far with this process. So we're here with you guys, and we're excited to continue to work with us, with you, and we look forward to having you on campus. Like Ryan said, if you do want to come on campus, let me know. I'm happy to have anybody come through, check out campus. I just got word that we actually are going to be able to get onto the training ship here for our tour program through the entire year, the entire academic year, until the students leave on their cruise for the summer. So if you want to come and join, we'll show you campus. We'll get your student into shadow a class. You get to actually tour aboard the training ship State of Maine, which is really exciting. It's kind of the pinnacle of why a lot of students end up being here. So come and see us. We'd be really, really happy to engage with you on campus. And for those students who have already been accepted into a program here, you can actually meet in person with the parents while students are shadowing class. You can actually meet with Ryan and his team to discuss their financial aid programming and figure out the best process for that. So from me, it doesn't. I was waiting to see if maybe he was going to fill his question in, but I don't have anything else to say. So with that, I just want to say one more thank you. Thank you all for tuning in tonight, for watching these episodes, and we will see you in the next one.
Yeah, I want to say thank you too.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
thank you guys very much for joining us. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking with us. And it's been a real pleasure to answer your questions, and I hope you stick with it, and feel free to reach out, like Zach said, to either of us if you have any questions that pop up. That's what we're here for. We can help out, or we can find the people who can help you out. So thanks so much. Really, really love doing this, and have a great night.
See you.